The catch and release season for walleye on Mille Lacs Lake ended in early September this year. And joining me in the studio to update us on the state's efforts to bring back the walleye in the lake and to talk about the health of all of the state's game and fish is Tom Landwehr, the Commissioner of the Department of Natural Resources. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Catch and release of walleye was allowed on Lake Mille Lacs until September 6th. How have the restrictions worked, and what do you envision for the future?
Well, of course, most people know that Mille Lacs right now is in a little bit of trouble. The walleye population has declined, and we're at probably the lowest walleye population we've been in a long time. And so this year, the state, in consultation with the tribes, developed a very conservative season. We estimated the total allowable harvest to be 40,000 pounds. The state's take of that is 28,000 pounds. Mm-hmm. When we run through models that predicts what kind of season we can have in order to stay under that, we concluded that a one fish limit during the ice fishing season and a catch and release during the open water season was the only tool that we could use, the only regulation we could use that would keep us under that 28,000 pounds. We've never done a catch and release on Mille Lacs. We didn't know what to expect. When we implemented it, we felt pretty confident at the beginning that would get us through the whole season, but we quickly realized that the catch rates were very high. In other words, people were catching a lot of fish. The fish were hungry. The water temperatures warmed up very quickly this summer, which increases what we call hooking mortality, the number of fish that are released that subsequently die. Mm-hmm. And we have to count those fish. We model the number of fish, and we have to count those fish in our quota. And we realized, by middle of July that we were rapidly approaching that quota. So as you know, in consultation with the governor, we concluded that the fact that we had to close a year ago on Mille Lacs was devastating to the local economy. The governor and I talked about implications of continuing with catch and release past the quota, and determined that that was the only palatable solution for the economy of that area, was to allow catch and release. With the knowledge that the catch and release continuing past the quota would not have a significant impact on the population of walleyes in the lake, and that we would not be approaching a real conservation issue. So we continued until September 6th. We terminated on September 6th. Realized at that point that most of the fishing was over, but that we did not want to push that harvest any higher.
Any speculation as to what may happen in the future with that?
So there's a long process that we go through with the 1837 bands. There are 6 Wisconsin bands, 2 Minnesota bands. We have a biological group that works, we call it the Fisheries Technical Committee, that looks at the netting that they do, the experimental netting in the fall to determine what the population is. They will be meeting just next week to talk about what is the status of the fish population, what is a safe allowable harvest, and then we'll be going back in January and talking about what the open water season looks like. So it's a process that we engage in with the tribes to determine what's safe, and then we work with our advisory committee to talk about what's the preferred regulation package given the poundage of fish that we can take.
Well, and speaking of the advisory committee, the academic representative, Dr. Paul Venturelli, resigned in May. And then just recently, also the tribal representative, Jamie Edwards, resigned. In his resignation letter to you, he said that committee members, quote, dismiss scientific findings and do not respect the sovereign status of American Indian tribes. So what's next for this group, and how would you like to see things move forward? Well,
it's important to remember the purpose for the group. We constituted the group, probably a year and a half ago, because again, if we know that, for instance, we can take 28,000 pounds, the DNR can just go into a back room and figure out what regulation fits it, but that may not be what the stakeholders want. And so we pulled this group together to really counsel us, advise us on what they would prefer in terms of fishing options. And so it's a very important group to have input on, and so we have to have that group to be giving us that input. Very disappointed, very disheartened that both Paul and Jamie resigned. I think it takes a lot of time. That was one of Paul's reasons for quitting, is he's got a young family. But I don't expect the group to sort of just carte blanche accept the things that we give them. I expect them to challenge us, because that improves the rigor of our decision making. And so yes, they challenge the science. In that, we have improved our science. We have improved the techniques we use to model populations and so on. And so I consider that a healthy healthy characteristic is that the group does challenge that. It's unfortunate that the two resigned, but we will continue the input group.
And will you add another tribal representative in the near future?
Still to discuss. I want to talk with the Mille Lacs Band leadership and find out what their desire is. Since this group is really primarily to discuss the state's alternatives rather than the tribal alternatives, it's most important to have the non-tribal members there. But I wanted to be able to offer the tribes a seat if they in fact wanted that.
Well, let's turn to moose hunting. It's been banned in the state since 2012, but the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior Chippewa is reinstating the hunting season. They believe that the moose population has stabilized. So from the DNR's perspective, has the moose population stabilized, and will moose hunting return?
Well, it's important to remember how we got to where we were. Prior to 2012, the moose population had been in very, very serious decline for the previous 3 years. I think it dropped something like 50% over 3 years. And we can't point to any one reason why the population is declining. There's a number of sort of complementary factors. So there's a very serious winter tick problem. There's winters are warmer, which is not good for moose. Right. They have liver flukes, they have brainworm. All these things kind of seem to be piling on and helping drive the moose population lower. Since we did not have one single tool that we could use to stop the decline, the only component of mortality that we had any influence over was a hunting season. So we terminated the Minnesota hunting season in 2012. The bands followed suit for different reasons. There are 3 bands in the 1854 treaty area: the Grand Portage, the Bois Forte, and the Fond du Lac. Grand Portage and Bois Forte are in an agreement with the state of Minnesota for which they receive a payment every year. That agreement says that they will not have a big game season when the state of Minnesota does not have a big game season. So they were compelled to not have a season. Fond du Lac is not a party to that agreement. They have full treaty right, the ability to exercise full treaty rights. As part of their treaty rights, they are allowed to take the allowable harvest of moose. So the population has stabilized in about the 4,000 animal range, which was again about half of what it had been. Right. We'd like to see a longer term trend, if this is just a blip or if this is actually the new reality. The band, the Fond du Lac Band, has concluded that at this time it's important for them to continue a hunt. So they did announce to us they were going to. We concur that the harvest they're proposing does not propose a conservation risk. We advise them, we still would like them to not, because we don't know what is happening here, but they decided to continue. So as we conclude today, deer hunting season is just around the corner, November 5th. What are some important reminders for hunters? The deer hunting season, we'll have almost 500,000 hunters out there. It is one of the biggest days in Minnesota outdoors. The things that we always want to remind people is, be aware of the regulations, first off, right? So know what you can and you can't do. Make sure you wear your blaze orange. We've really dramatically decreased the number of firearms accidents by virtue of blaze orange and firearm safety training. Be especially careful around deer stands. We actually have more people dying and getting hurt as a result of falling out of a deer stand. Wear your harness. Make sure that everything is secure before you climb up. And of course, always know where you're shooting and what's beyond the basic principles of firearm safety. So it should be a very good year. We're very optimistic the population's up, and we're hopeful that we'll have a good harvest and a safe season.
Well, it sounds great. Thank you so much, Commissioner Landwehr, for coming in today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, and have a great fall.
Thanks, you too.